So this is routine. She's maybe 6 months. Her whole family still under the rubbles. Israeli occupation just destroyed her house, and the whole family is still under the rubbles. She and her two brothers just survived. The ambulance just got them from under the rubbles, and as you see, her head, dangers in her head, and till now they don't know if her parents and her family is still alive or not. So this is like one from hundreds, maybe thousands of Palestinian children who got injured, and most of them got murdered by the Israeli rockets.
لا إله إلا الله. 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 تعالي يا عمو، تعالي تعالي يا حبيبتي، تعالي تعالي يا عمو، تعالي حبيبتي، تعالي تعالي يا حبيبتي، تعالي 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 حبيبتي، تعالي 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 خذي شيء،
يلا يا حجة،
تعالي تعالي خذي استنى يلا حبيبتي، اجري جوا عند خليك. ليش حبيبتي تخلي؟ يلا يا عمو،
يا ماما،
يلا حبيبتي،
يا ماما،
يلا جوا يا اختي، جوا يا امي. يلا حبيبتي، هيا معاك، روح. يلا يا امه، يلا هاي البنت دخلت جوا حبيبي، يلا تعال. الله انزل، اجري يلا. جوا
يلا.
Hello there.
To live in a Jewish state. What a blessing that would be. And how easy. All we'd have to do is walk in the footsteps of Abraham and Moses and follow in the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not worship material objects. Thou shalt not kill nor covet, meaning don't yearn for, and certainly don't steal any of thy neighbor's possessions, land, nor blockade their freedom. Take care of the poor and oppressed over all else. Or we could live in a Christian state, and what a blessing and how easy that would be. All we'd have to do was follow Jesus, the modern name of a Jewish man called Yeshua, who reminded us to also follow Abraham and Moses in the 10 Commandments, to never worship material objects nor idols, to not steal nor kill, to love unconditionally, to judge no one, and care most of all for the poor and oppressed, and to prioritize looking at our own faults and devote ourselves to their correction and improvement, to never fall victim to feelings of arrogance or somehow being superior to somebody else. Or we could live in a Muslim state. What a blessing and how easy that would be. All we'd have to do is follow Muhammad, peace be upon him, who told us to follow Abraham, and Jesus, who was called Yeshua, and Moses, and follow the 10 Commandments, to never worship material objects nor idols, to not kill nor steal, and to take care of the poor and oppressed over all else, to submit to the highest unfathomable good with acceptance and patience and courage. We could also live in all three states at once, because it turns out they are highly compatible, and it sounds like heaven on earth, which I think was the idea. This guidance that we now call Islam and Christianity and Judaism came from three people after each fasted for a month to reduce the influence of this material world, to leave themselves empty, to receive something from that highest good. And they did. They each had a revelation that human beings should never associate anything physical or that springs from desire and self-interest with an unfathomable, all-encompassing oneness God, Allah, Yahweh, which all mean the same thing, regardless of religion or tradition, a word that means that which is everything, that which precedes and surrounds and exists inside and outside all that exists. And each of these three people who had this revelation were from the same family and share the same ancestor, who are all our ancestors, and who shared this same message, that this world is temporary. It's a test of our willingness to be a good and humble person who uses our earthly desires as fuel, but not direction. And each one of them, in succession, said that the world was not listening to their sibling who had just come prior. It turns out that the beliefs of all the children of humanity are also completely compatible with Gautama Buddha, who reminded humankind that our attachment to material things leads to suffering. And our entire human family is also compatible with the beliefs of Hinduism, which advise that humankind must be aware of our karma, which could be interpreted simply as that which we hate, we become, and that which we love loves us back. All the wisdoms of the world, practiced as prescribed, create harmony among all the families of the earth. And it should go without saying that there's nothing that could ever justify killing or kidnapping a child, or civilians, or evicting a family from their home, or bombing a building, or seizing land someone is living on already, or voting for leaders or tax dollars to finance these kinds of crimes, or the weapons that are used to commit them, or contribute in any way to the suffering of anyone because of where their family was born or what their religion is, when there's clearly no difference between any of our religions or our families. Let us celebrate and respect our differences, especially and most of all those that we do not understand or are none of our business. The nature of this universe and that which has true authority over it and our little world is certainly not perceived in the judgments of any of us, its tiny, near clueless, temporary guests. A wise elder once said that we do not have the divine wisdom to know what came before or what comes after, nor what is within nor outside the object of our judgments. May we focus on the job we have in front of us, which, among other things at this time, is to always speak and act and vote against violence and against all those sins so clearly described by our mothers and fathers. May we devote ourselves to peace, outwardly and inwardly, for as long as there is war in ourselves, there will be war in the world. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's my bad Arabic, which means peace be upon you. And may that unfathomable oneness, which is everything and encompasses everything, precedes, postdates, and surrounds, and is within us all, bless you in every aspect of your life.
Our colleague from Al Jazeera Arabic, Wael Al-Dahdu, who has been reporting on events in Gaza for a long time, has lost his wife and son and daughter as a result of the shelling of their house in Nuseirat in the central Gaza Strip. Those are the pictures from the moments after he found out. And on behalf of the entire Al Jazeera team across the Al Jazeera media network, we want to offer our most sincere condolences at this time for himself and for the thousands of Palestinians who have been killed over the last 2+ weeks in the Gaza Strip. Our colleague.
If you are in America or you are pro-Palestine, just listen up. So as you know, America has not had a speaker because they are just messy and stupid. Well, this is the new guy, Mike Johnson, House's staunchest conservatives. Staunchest being he's loyal and he's committed. As we can see, former chairman of the Conservative Republican Committee played a pivotal role in congressional efforts to overturn the 2020 election. That's already red flag number one. An evangelical Christian, he has voted for the national abortion ban, co-sponsored 20-week abortion ban, earning him an A+ rating from the anti-abortion group. Red flag number two. He is in opposition of same-sex marriages. He is in opposition of sending aid to Ukraine, but he totally supports sending money to Israel. Also, he doesn't have any fucking experience in a top leadership position. So he's unhinged, and we can manipulate, but he's unhinged. So here is his little statement on Ukraine. American taxpayers have sent over $1 billion in aid to Ukraine last year, but we're not talking about how much we send to Israel every year. Like, he's trying to act like he cares. He doesn't. Here's another thing. We must elect a speaker so the House can take all necessary actions to end Hamas forever. We know Hamas is not the problem. Hamas at least gives food, water, and personal hygiene. America doesn't even believe food and water are natural rights. So we need to figure out where this man's money's at. We need to figure out what we can do to obstruct and block everything, because this man is a problem. He's an honest problem. Nonetheless, he's still a fucking problem. Here's just another article. Mike Johnson, an evangelical Christian, holds ties to Israel's far right. Oh, look at that. What do we have here? What do we have here? What do we have here? Like, guys, let's figure some shit out. Keep boycotting, keep protesting. Now we gotta drain more pockets. We gotta keep doing what the fuck we're doing, because no, we're not losing any more people. We are not sitting here silently. The problems are literally in front of our faces, and now it's time to get them out. So let's do this. If you are in America or...
This is war. It is combat. It is bloody. It is ugly, and it's going to be messy. And innocent civilians are going to be hurt going forward. I wish I could tell you something different. I wish that wasn't going to happen. But it is going to happen. And that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it dismissible. It doesn't mean that we aren't going to still express concerns about that and do everything we can to help the Israelis do everything they can to minimize it. But that's unfortunately the nature of conflict. Civilians are going to be hurt going forward. I wish I could tell you something different.
Why do these politicians watch that whole clip, watch the entire clip in the Stitch, but why do they act like they have to kill civilians? This is war. It's unfortunate. I'm not saying it's okay, but we just have to do this in order to solve the threat. You don't have to do this. Brainstorm. Think of new ways. Try diplomacy. You don't have to kill civilians, because this is just war. It's just the way it is. We are forgetting the power of choice. Just because tradition says that doesn't mean you have to follow tradition. Think of more peaceful, emotionally intelligent ways to regulate conflict. It might be difficult, but the opposite of that is killing civilians.
Innocent civilians are going to be hurt.
Palestine, tomorrow will be free. Palestine, tomorrow will be free.
We are operating militarily according to rules of international law, period. What you guys just saw was the Israeli president reassuring to the world that they are trying to follow the rules of war, which is a lie. And the fact of the matter is they are trying to maximize civilian casualties, not minimize them. There are two pieces of evidence for this, what they have done and what they've continued to do, and plus what they say to their own population. You see, when they address the world, they say things like we are trying to minimize civilian casualties and we are playing by the rules of war. But when they address their own people, they say we are dropping hundreds of tons of bombs on Gaza. The focus is destruction, not accuracy, by the Israeli army spokesperson. Again, we have a veteran of the Israeli army talking to soldiers. He says wipe out their families and their mothers and their children. These animals must not be allowed to live any longer. The dehumanization. He is literally melting, and with his last breath, he is dehumanizing us. Okay, so let's look at what they've done for the past 2 weeks. They've bombed hospitals and mosques and schools inside and outside of Gaza, churches and UN refugee centers, all of which maximize civilian casualties. And a lot of you may be asking, why try to maximize civilian casualties? What do they gain from this? And the reason is to try to force the civilians of Gaza to turn against their government. Their insane and evil plan is to collectively punish the civilian population of Gaza by starving them, dehydrating them, and taking out as many of them as possible in hopes that they turn against their government and surrender the city without them having to go in.
We are working a little more time. I'll wait. I love you like you've never felt. Need a little.
Breaking news! Scientists have recently made a groundbreaking discovery. An immense ocean lies beneath the Earth's surface, surpassing the combined size of all our oceans on land. To elaborate further, this ocean is located an astonishing 400 miles below the Earth's crust and resides within a peculiar blue rock called ringwoodite. It is not merely a liquid, solid, or gas, but rather a distinct molecular structure of water concealed within the rocky mantle. The scientists stumbled upon this revelation while analyzing wave patterns, which revealed the presence of water beneath the surface. By calculating the speed of these waves, researchers were able to ascertain the type of rocks that contain the water, ultimately leading them to identify ringwoodite as the host. Remarkably, their investigations unveiled that ringwoodite can hold up to 1.5% of its weight in water. The immensity of this unknown realm surpasses our reach, dwarfing even the vast expanse of oceans on our terrestrial domain, an astounding notion. Unveiling its secrets could furnish scientists with vital clues about the origins of our planet, bolstering the hypothesis that Earth's water originated internally, rather than being delivered by celestial bodies like asteroids and comets. Rest assured, I shall provide regular updates on this fascinating development. Breaking news!
Leave it to my good people in Ireland. They are making me proud of my ancestry. They are speaking out when everybody else is not. When every other first world country is sitting on their hands and just pretending like Israel has the right to do whatever they wish. No. Let's hear this really heartfelt speech. Let's go ahead and listen.
Hamas breached international law on the 7th of October. Hamas targeted innocent civilians in the most callous and inhumane manner, and their actions have been rightly condemned by right-thinking people across the world. But we should also be very clear. Israel has breached international law, not just on every day since October the 7th, but virtually every single day for decades. Israel occupies Palestinian land against international law. Israel blockades Palestinian territory against international law. Israel builds and expands illegal settlements against international law. Israel enforces an apartheid system that restricts the movements of Palestinians and denies their fundamental rights against international law. And Israel regularly and systematically attacks and kills Palestinian civilians against international law. So the question that must be answered by all of us in political life is this: how does the world respond to flagrant abuses of international law? When it comes to the horrendous war crimes of Hamas, the response was very clear and very consistent. World leaders queued up to say Israel has the right to defend itself. One after another repeated the words, the great and the good, including our government: Israel has the right to defend itself. Repeated in statement after statement, tweet after tweet, despite the full knowledge that those words have become contaminated. The words "Israel has the right to defend itself" means in practice that Israel takes that right as licence to bombard civilians, to bomb schools, hospitals and other civilian infrastructure, and it has now been taken as licence to enforce the displacement of 1 million people from one end of an open-air prison to another, to deny food, energy, medical supplies to a besieged civilian population, to actually deny them water, to ensure that children, the sick, the disabled, the elderly will literally die of thirst. Israel has the right to defend itself has now become cover for Israel has the right to commit genocide right in front of our eyes. How come we never hear the words "Palestine has the right to defend itself"? Not when a humanitarian flotilla bringing essential supplies to Gaza is met with a military assault and the murder by Israel of 9 unarmed activists. Not when Palestinians march in peaceful protest against a legal blockade and are met again with a military assault and the murder of 300 of them. Not after the countless bombings of Gaza by Israeli forces. Not even when Israel targeted and murdered 4 little Palestinian boys playing football on a beach. And not when Palestinians were dragged from their homes and forced to watch as those homes were destroyed to allow for new illegal Israeli settlements on lands that are clearly defined in international law as part of Palestine. And not after the countless offensive attacks by Israel against the people of Gaza or the West Bank have we or heard anybody in this House or any Western leader utter the words "Palestine has the right to defend itself." And why not? And by the way, I'm not asking you to say those words, and in fact it's just as well you don't, because we all know that the people of Palestine can't defend themselves. Not against one of the most powerful military forces in the world that is backed up by even more powerful military forces. The truth is that the people of Palestine, just like the innocent people of Israel, don't need the international community to tell them that their leaders have the right to inflict more bombings, more pain, more suffering. They need the international community to say stop, to say release the hostages, to say stop the bombings, the siege, the slaughter. They need the international community to tell Israel to stop the blockade, stop the apartheid, stop the annexation, to stop the genocide. And they need countries, Taoiseach, to lead the way. And Ireland should be one of those countries that leads the way. We know colonialism, we know oppression, we know conflict, but we also know conflict resolution. We know peace building, we know nation building. And because of what we know, what our history has taught us, our call tonight must be clear. Immediate, full and unequivocal ceasefires and a decisive international intervention that leads to negotiations and to a lasting and just peace settlement, and to, at long last, to a free, sovereign and independent Palestine.
As we reported just a moment ago, here is the sound. It is 2 bites back to back. First up is the sound of the Secretary General that is now being slammed by the Israeli ambassador, where the Secretary General is now, the ambassador is calling for his resignation after he appears to justify the surprise attack by Hamas on October 7th. Let's listen here back to back.
It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. They have seen their land steadily devoured by settlements and plagued by violence, their economy stifled, their people displaced, and their homes demolished. Their hopes for a political solution to their plight have been vanishing.
Mr. Secretary General, in what world do you live? Definitely, this is not our world. Saturday, October 7th, will go down in history as nothing less than a brutal massacre. Saturday, October 7th, is a wake-up call for the entire free world, a wake-up call against extremism and terror.
Well, this is quite a remarkable moment and development. Now live from the United Nations, Eric Shawn is with us. To quote the Secretary General, it is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum, with the Israeli ambassador to the UN then calling for him to now resign for those remarks, Eric.
I mean, absolutely right, Sandra. It is a stunning diplomatic news, breaking news here at the United Nations with Israeli Ambassador Gilad Erdan calling on Secretary Guterres to resign because of his remarks. Some here taking his remarks as justifying the terrorism, blaming the savage, barbaric savagery and murder by the terrorists of Hamas on the directly on the Israeli occupation. This is not the first time that the Secretary General has used those terms, that events in the Middle East have not happened in a vacuum. But in those remarks, he did basically refer directly to the 56 years of what he called Israeli occupation. This has raised the hackles so much, not just of the Israeli UN delegation here, but also the foreign minister, Eli Cohen, actually canceled a meeting that he had with the Secretary General after the Security Council speech in which he gave earlier this morning. Let me read to you a little bit of what the UN ambassador has tweeted out. He said, quote, this is from Gilad Erdan, quote, the shocking speech by the UN Secretary General at the Security Council meeting while rockets are being fired at Israel proved conclusively beyond any doubt that the Secretary General is completely disconnected from reality in our region. Goes on to say that he shows understanding for the campaign of mass murder of children, women, and the elderly. He is not fit to lead the UN. I call on him to resign immediately. In other words, the Israeli ambassador is saying that the Secretary General doesn't understand what mass murder and vicious, barbaric, savage terrorism is, attacking the innocent civilians of Israel based on the radical Islamic ideology and hatred of the mass murdering terrorists of Hamas. We will likely see more fireworks on the diplomatic front from this, as certainly the Arab states will probably weigh in on behalf of the Secretary General. The Palestinian Observer here earlier basically accusing Israel of violating international law, saying that it is Israel that treats the Palestinians in Gaza, as he said, his word, quote, subhuman, but it is very rare in the halls of pinstriped diplomacy that you see such a public fireworks and a public call from a United Nations ambassador to call on the Secretary General to resign. We're now waiting for the Secretary General's response from this. Stefan Dujarric, who is the spokesman for the Secretary General, likely, I would gather, Sandra Stable would probably reject the Israeli ambassador's demand, but we may get more explanation on exactly what the Secretary General meant during his remarks at the Security Council this morning.
Eric, two questions quickly here. Did the Secretary General condemn Hamas in any way, yes or no?
He talked about terrorism and this sort of thing, but this is one of the issues that we've had here at the United Nations, in which the foreign minister took to task the nations that, yes, they do talk about the occupation, they do talk about the humanitarian situation, what's being now in Gaza, envisioned on the Palestinian people in Gaza, separating the civilians from the terrorists of Hamas. But the criticism here is that there is not the outrage, said Antony Blinken, our Secretary of State. He says, where's the outrage of those here at the United Nations condemning the terrorist act specifically of Hamas and naming Hamas? You too often do not get such blunt, direct language from the diplomats here, and the critics here and others say that it's just a shame that makes a mockery and a farce of what the United Nations, of tenets of the United Nations, was founded on in the ashes of World War II.
Okay. History tells that the UN Security Council loves to condemn Israel, and we'll see whether or not that condemnation comes today from inside the UN. Thank you, Eric, for that.
As we reported just a moment ago, here is the sound of the Secretary General that is now being slammed by the Israeli ambassador, where the Secretary General is now, the ambassador is calling for his resignation.
Everyone knows the mainstream media is nothing but a bunch of lies, but what finally brought down CNN were their lies and bias on COVID because of the corruption they had with the pharmaceutical industry. And I think what's going to finally bring Fox News down completely is going to be this Israel at war narrative, full of their bias and lies, which is due to the corruption involved in their Zionist control.
After he appears to justify the surprise attack by Hamas on October 7th. Let's listen here back to back.
It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. They have seen their land steadily devoured by settlements and plagued by violence, their economy stifled, their people displaced, and their homes demolished. Their hopes for a political solution to their plight have been vanishing.
Mr. Secretary General.
But the only way that you're going to know about the bias in Fox News is if you were able to see the clip in its context, like I'm going to show you here, because you get your news from TikTok or some other source, because the mainstream media is more interested in constructing a narrative out of this than they are about reporting to you what happened.
I have condemned unequivocally the horrifying and unprecedented 7 October acts of terror by Hamas in Israel. Nothing can justify the deliberate killing, injuring, and kidnapping of civilians or the launching of rockets against civilian targets. All hostages must be treated humanely and released immediately and without conditions. And I respectfully note the presence among us of members of their families. Excellencies, it is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. They have seen their land steadily devoured by settlements and plagued by violence, their economy stifled, their people displaced, and their homes demolished. Their hopes for a political solution to their plight have been vanishing. But the grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas, and those appalling attacks cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
Because now you can see what the UN Secretary actually said was incredibly reasonable, balanced, and fair. Any level-headed person would think the same way. So given how reasonable that was, what part of his speech has actually got them calling for his resignation?
To ease epic suffering, make the delivery of aid easier and safer, and facilitate the release of hostages, I reiterate my appeal for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
In what world do you live? Definitely, this is not our world. Saturday, October 7, will go down in history as nothing less than a brutal massacre.
And you, Mr. Secretary General, have lost all morality and impartiality. I think that the Secretary General must resign.
Some here taking his remarks as justifying the terrorism, blaming the savage, barbaric savagery and murder by the terrorists of Hamas. Let me read to you a little bit of what the UN ambassador has tweeted out. He said, quote, this is...
Did the Secretary General condemn Hamas in any way, yes or no?
I have condemned unequivocally the horrifying and unprecedented 7 October acts of terror by Hamas in Israel.
He talked about terrorism and this sort of thing, but this is one of the issues that we've had here at the United Nations in which...
Okay, but did he condemn Hamas, yes or no? Yes, he did, over and over again. But you don't care, right? You just want to get back to what happened on October 7th and ignore everything that's happened since then. You're so grateful that happened so that you could achieve your goals of destroying all the Palestinians' lives, displacing 2 million people. What's going on in the West Bank? What does that have to do with what happened over in Gaza? Oh, nothing. It's just it's just good time to just go in and do what. There's no Hamas in the West Bank, right? But no, it's the October 7th. Let's get back to October 7th. Let's get back to January 6th. Let's get back to wearing a mask. Your bias, your lies, your bullshit are on full display for the American people to analyze with our brains and go, wait a minute, what's going on here? What's this propaganda bullshit? Because guess what? We don't have a dog in the fight. This is not our war. This is not our fight. This is not our problem. Why are you Fox News alert? You should be so concerned about what the UN thinks about what Israel's doing. He should resign. No, see, no, we're not for war. We're not for all this propaganda bullshit you're shoving down our throats. This will be the end of Fox News. Just like CNN had ended itself. This will be the end of Fox News.
The sound of the Secretary General that is now being slammed by the Israeli ambassador, where the Secretary...
Israel is facing backlash after a brand collaboration with BetterHelp. Meanwhile, Gaza is just asking for any help. The official Israel Twitter account said that they'll give a free 6-month subscription to anyone affected by the war. Not to be outdone, Blue Apron is offering rations and ZipRecruiter is recruiting for the army. Israel is facing backlash after a brand collaboration with BetterHelp. Meanwhile, Gaza is just asking for it.
I'm hoping, of course, they will, is they're going to what's called raise Gaza. They're going to destroy it. What is important to understand, what the logic of the war is based on the divine plan.
There is no permission from the Torah to have any mercy whatsoever during war. not on children, not on women, not on anybody.
But the point is right here that Hashem say, do not have mercy on the children. Kill all their children also. Why? There's no difference between them and their children. In 10 years from now, these children will attack you on the way. Hashem knows, God knows.
We're not playing by your rules. We're playing by the rules of the Torah.
The verse in the whole Bible, it says, happy is the one that takes the infants of Babel and of Edom and smashes them on the rock, just like they did to us. And this is what we say before benching. Right? That's the end of this. That the ultimate revenge again on innocent infants. Happy is the one that takes the infants and smashes them and kills them on the rock. And then we bless Hashem for the food that we ate. You kill all men and all women, me'olel ve'ad yonek, even babies who breastfeed. Amazing.
תעלו והצליחו, תכסחו אותם כמה שיותר, שלא להשאיר מהם זכר, שלא הם, לא אמא שלהם, לא הילדה שלהם, לא התינוקות שלהם, אסור להם לחיות לחיות האלה, עם תותחים, עם הפצצות, להרוס בית ולהיכנס הלאה, להרוס עוד בית ולהיכנס. כמה על מה שהם עוללים לנו, עכשיו הולכת להתחולל. עכשיו הולכים להיות דברים שלא חלמנו עליהם. כן? שיפלו עליהם פצצות שישמידו אותם. כל מה שהנביאים ניבאו הולך על אחרית ימים מתרחש עכשיו.
Which I'm hoping, of course, they will.
This viral post claims that this image shows a tent city created for displaced Israelis. Another post says that the encampment is located in Eilat, Israel, and houses 60,000 Israelis. While another says that the tent city is located in a Hamas-controlled area of the Gaza Strip and was created for displaced Zionists. While there are reports of tent cities in Gaza and Israel for people displaced by the war, this image doesn't show any of those encampments. The image was actually created using AI technology. Using these sources, I'll show you how we figured it out and the red flags that we spotted along the way. First, we conducted a reverse image search using Reveye. We couldn't find this image published by any reputable news source that was covering the war. That was the first red flag. Next, we analyzed the image. We know that AI is bad at creating bodies, as well as providing consistent shading and texture. In the viral image, we spotted several misshapen people. At least 2 of them have different sized legs, while others' arms aren't to scale with the size of their legs and torso, like in this picture. So that was another red flag. Next, this is supposed to be the Israeli flag, but it isn't accurate. This flag has 2 misshapen stars of David, while the real flag only has 1 at the center. Another red flag, the texture of the sand is too smooth. The shadowing from the tents is inconsistent. And finally, tents in the viral image don't match pictures of tents at real encampments. This viral post claims that this image shows a tent.
And I will show you the massive destruction that happened to the Zahra city in the middle of the strip. More than 14 residential towers got destroyed by the Israeli airstrikes. Imagine how many people have been homeless and lost their places. Like Gaza need a new Nakba.
So this is Routine. She's not maybe 6 months. Her whole family is still under the rubbles. Israeli occupation just destroyed her house, and the whole family is still under the rubbles. She and her 2 brothers just survived. The ambulance just got them from under the rubbles, and as you see, her head, dangers in her head, and till now they don't know if her parents and her family is still alive or not. So this is like one from hundreds, maybe thousands of Palestinian children who got injured, and most of them got murdered by the Israeli rockets.
Something, and it's absurd, it's crazy. You know, occupation and oppression have nothing to do with Judaism, and to criticize these things is not anti-Semitic. So it's important to keep these things separate in our minds. Here you can see a Jewish Israeli, a rabbi from a group called Rabbis for Human Rights, planting an olive tree alongside a Palestinian farmer. Here you can see an Israeli activist protesting the policies of her government alongside Palestinian colleagues in the resistance. In Israel, all Jewish men and women are required to serve in the military, but there have been thousands of Israelis that have stood up and said, we refuse to take part in this institution, and they're known as the refuseniks. And I have to say that in Israel, there's a much higher tolerance for debate and dissent on this issue than you find in the United States. In Israeli newspapers, you'll find much more candid descriptions of the occupation than in U.S. mainstream newspapers, where sometimes it's even taboo to use the word occupation. But in Israel, actually, the majority of the people are opposed to the settlements and opposed to the occupation as it is right now. So a lot of times, people in the United States feel like they have to support the Israeli government in order to support the Jewish people or the Israeli people. And they don't realize that just like in the United States, there are Americans that don't always support what part of their government may do. There are Israeli citizens that don't support the Israeli government. And actually, a very telling statistic shows that it is 5 times more likely for an Israeli soldier to commit suicide than to be killed in a terrorist attack. And so when people talk about this occupation as helping the Jewish people, they don't realize how many Israelis are actually against it and how important it is for the Jewish people as well as the Palestinian people to end this. Or something. And it's absurd, it's crazy. You know, occupation and oppression have nothing to do with Judaism. And to criticize these things is not anti-Semitic. So it's important to keep these things separate.
The fuck? Greater Israel is an expression. It has a biblical and political meaning to it that varied and evolved over time. It is known as the Zionist plan for the Middle East. The fuck? Watch this video and I'll be right back. So this includes Palestine, South Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. I mean, what the fuck is this? Many historians and international relations watchers state that this is the reason Israel is slowly and strategically grabbing more and more land from its neighbors, specifically Palestine. However, it is also important to keep in mind that the design of Greater Israel may not strictly be a Zionist project from the Middle East. So many experts and academics have been saying this recently, that this is part of U.S. foreign policy aiming to extend U.S. hegemony to the Middle East. The fuck? Such a policy being pursued by the U.S. in this region goes along with the Yinon plan. This plan is an Israeli strategy to ensure regional superiority. It is a continuation of an earlier ploy that Britain used in the Middle East. So the red is what they want Israel's borders to be. And that Prime Minister of Finance did a speech with that map in his front, on the front of the podium. Oh my God. Someone tell me how the hell this is not colonization. I had so many people coming in my comment section talking about it's not colonization. What the fuck do you call this shit? It makes perfect sense why we have this allyship with Israel. Because Israel is participating in colonization, and America, well, America has always participated in it, right? Puerto Rico, Hawaii, I mean, the list goes on. This is fucking wild. We are watching in real-time colonization. America just can't leave brown people alone. At this point, it looks like they're practicing on the Palestinians, and they have been practicing to find a way to be able to do this to the other Arab nations. And that is why the Arab nations are like not even playing with America right now. This is some bullshit.